Have you ever wondered if the universe is actually listening to your practice, or if you are simply talking to yourself in a quiet room? Have you ever felt desperate for a sign and then questioned whether that desperation itself is the biggest obstacle on your path? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to explore a topic that many people whisper about but rarely examine with real honesty. How does a deity show approval of one's sadhana? And how do we tell the difference between genuine spiritual ripening and the mind's hunger for reassurance? The first idea is that true approval is less about dramatic signs and more about inner transformation that becomes visible through your choices, your speech, your stability, and your compassion. The second idea is that the most reliable signs are the ones that reduce ego, not inflate it, because the purpose of sadhana is awakening unwisdom, not spiritual entertainment. Let me start with a story that feels like it could be happening in any city, any household, any ordinary life, because the spiritual journey does not begin in temples alone. It begins in the part of the heart that is tired of suffering, untired of repeating the same loops. There was a person who began sadhana after life felt like it was closing in. Not one big tragedy, but many small pressures. Work felt uncertain. Relationships felt tense. Sleep felt thin. The mind felt loud. They had tried motivation and productivity tricks. They had tried self-help. They had tried distraction, but nothing touched the deepest layer. They wanted something that could cleanse the inner noise, not just cover it, so they started a daily practice. It was simple at first. A short morning routine, a few minutes of chanting, a few minutes of quiet sitting, and an intention to live more carefully through the day. They chose a deity form that spoke to their heart, not because someone forced them, because something inside them felt drawn. They felt hope, and hope can be both medicine and trap. Medicine when it fuels steady effort, trap when it demands quick proof. After a few days, they wanted to know, is this working? After a few weeks, they wanted to know, am I being seen? After a few months, they wanted to know, am I being approved? And that is where the mind can become restless, because the mind loves certainty. The mind loves confirmation. The mind loves to feel special. But the spiritual path often begins by refusing to feed those cravings. This person began searching for signs. They watched the world like a detective. A bird on the window, a song lyric, a dream, a random coincidence, a flicker of light. They asked friends, do you think this is a sign? They asked strangers online, do you think this is approval? Their practice was sincere, but their anxiety was also sincere. And anxiety has a way of disguising itself as devotion. One day they went to a sacred place, the kind of place where many people go with longing. They stood there and prayed, please show me you accept my sadhana. Give me something undeniable, something dramatic, something that removes my doubt. And then nothing dramatic happened. They felt disappointed. They felt ignored. They felt shame for even asking. They felt anger toward themselves, then guilt for feeling anger. Their mind spiraled into a familiar loop. I am not good enough. I am not pure enough. I am doing it wrong. Others get signs. Why not me? The more they chased approval, the more they suffered. That is the first hidden lesson. When you chase signs, you often move away from the very qualities that make real signs possible. Because chasing signs is oft unchasing control. And control is oft unrooted in fear. Fear is an obstacle. Fear tightens the body, narrows the mind, and distorts perception. When fear is strong, you cannot see clearly. So even if life offers quiet guidance, you may miss it. In many wisdom traditions, the path is not built on spectacle. The path is built on steadiness. And steadiness has a special signature. It makes you less reactive. It makes you more honest. It makes you kinder. It makes you more responsible for your own mind. It makes you less dependent on praise or proof. That is what approval looks like in its most reliable form. Now let us pause and define sadhana in a lived way. Sadhana is not only rituals and mantras. Sadhana is the daily shaping of the self. It is the practice of turning the mind toward awakening. It is the practice of turning the heart toward compassion. It is the practice of aligning life with wisdom and integrity. If your practice does not enter your speech and your choices, it remains decorative. If it enters your speech and choices, it becomes transformative. So how would a deity show approval of that kind of transformation? Often in ways that are invisible to your craving mind but obvious to your deeper awareness. Let me tell you what happened next in the story. After that disappointing day, the person almost quit. They told themselves, "I tried and nothing happened." But a quiet part of them knew the truth. Something did happen. The disappointment revealed their attachment. Their attachment was not to the deity. Their attachment was to certainty. Their attachment was to being reassured. Their attachment was to a spiritual shortcut that would remove the discomfort of not knowing. They decided to keep practicing, but with a different attitude. They made a vow, not loud, not dramatic, just simple. I will practice for the sake of practicing. I will practice to become a better person. If signs come, fine. If they do not, I will not use that as an excuse to abandon my own awakening. That shift was the first real sign, because when you stop negotiating with the universe and start cultivating your mind with sincerity, you step onto the road where grace can meet you. Grace does not always meet bargaining. Grace often meets humility. Over the next few weeks, something subtle began to change. The person noticed that their mornings felt calmer, not euphoric, just steadier. They noticed that when they spoke to family, their tone was softer. They noticed that when stress rose, they could breathe instead of explode. They noticed that they were less interested in gossip, less interested in proving themselves, less interested in winning arguments. At first, they did not label this as approval. They thought it was just mood. But then they compared it to how they used to live. The old self was like a dry forest, ready to catch fire from one small spark. The new self had more moisture, more patience, more space. This is one of the clearest ways approval shows. Your inner climate changes. And when your inner climate changes, your destiny changes. Because your choices are now coming from wisdom rather than reflex. In Buddhist language, you could say their karma was shifting because their causes were shifting. In everyday language, you could say they were breaking patterns. In devotional language, you could say the deity was guiding them from within, turning their mind away from harm toward clarity. Now let us talk about the difference between dramatic signs and reliable signs. Dramatic signs can happen. People have dreams, visions, unusual coincidences. But dramatic signs are tricky because the mind can cling to them. The mind can inflate. The mind can build identity. I am chosen. I am special. I am ahead. Then pride grows. And pride is a spiritual poison. Pride makes you harsh. Pride makes you blind. Pride makes you judge others. Pride makes you think you no longer need discipline. And then the path collapses. Reliable signs are quieter. They do not inflate you. They humble you. They strengthen your ethics. They increase compassion. They make you more willing to serve. They make you more willing to apologize. They make you less interested in being right and more interested in being real. If you want to know whether your sadhana is being accepted, ask yourself this: am I becoming easier to live with? Am I becoming less harmful? Am I becoming more honest? Am I becoming more stable? Am I becoming more compassionate? If yes, then something is working at the deepest level. Now, you might be thinking, but I still want to feel connection. I still want to feel that the deity is near. That desire is not wrong. Connection can nourish devotion, but connection becomes more stable when it is rooted in practice rather than in chasing proof. So what are forms of connection that do not feed ego? One form is the sudden return of remembrance in the middle of daily life. You are about to say something cruel, and suddenly you remember your practice. You pause. You choose kindness. That moment is not created by your ordinary habits. That moment feels like help. That moment is guidance. Another form is the way obstacles begin to teach you rather than crush you. The same problems come, but they no longer feel like punishment. They feel like training. Your mind starts asking different questions. Instead of "why is this happening to me?" you ask, "what is this trying to teach me?" Instead of "how do I escape?" you ask, "how do I respond wisely?" That shift is a strong sign of awakening. Another form is the emergence of patience. Patience is a spiritual miracle disguised as a boring virtue. When patience grows, you stop demanding instant results. You stop chasing shortcuts. You stop bargaining with reality. You practice steadily. Patience dissolves many karmic knots because impatience is often what causes harsh speech, reckless decisions, and broken relationships. Another form is increased compassion for others. You begin to see that everyone is carrying something. The rude person is often afraid. The controlling person is often insecure. The jealous person is oft unwounded. Seeing this does not mean you tolerate harm. It means you respond with wisdom rather than hatred. When compassion grows, it is difficult to argue that your practice is being rejected, because compassion is one of the highest fruits any path can produce. Now let us deepen the story with a second scene. The person who was practicing had an old conflict with someone close, a long history of misunderstanding. Each conversation would turn into blame. Each meeting would reopen wounds. It was a karmic loop, two people triggering each other, then collecting evidence that the other is impossible. One day, after months of steady sadhana, the person met this individual again. The old tension rose, but something was different. The person could feel the tension in the body, tightening in the chest, heat in the face, quick breath. But instead of being possessed by it, they watched it. They remembered the deity. They remembered the vow to practice sincerity. They stayed quiet for a breath longer than usual. They listened longer than usual. They spoke slower. Then they said something they had never said before. "I know we keep hurting each other. I do not want to repeat it. I am willing to take responsibility for my part. And I also need us to speak with respect." The conversation did not become perfect, but it did not become a war. The loop cracked. A crack in a loop is a huge spiritual event, even if nobody outside the room notices, because karmic loops are what create destiny. When you break one loop, your future changes. Later that night, the person sat down to practice and felt a quiet warmth in the heart. Not fireworks, not a vision, just warmth. The mind tried to interpret it, to label it, to claim it, but the person did something wiser. They bowed inwardly, and they continued their practice. That is what maturity looks like. You receive what comes, and you do not cling. Now, A question that often arises is how to interpret experiences like dreams, coincidences, or bodily sensations during practice. Here is a grounded approach. First, do not dismiss everything. Some experiences can be meaningful, but also do not worship everything. Meaning is proven by transformation. If you have a dream and you become kinder, then the dream may have helped. If you have a dream and you become proud or obsessed, then the dream became a trap. Second, measure by ethics. Does the experience inspire you to live with more integrity? If yes, it may be aligned with the path. If it encourages you to harm, manipulate, or inflate yourself, it is not a sign of true approval. Third, measure by stability. True guidance tends to increase steadiness. It makes you more grounded. It makes you less desperate. If an experience makes you more anxious, more frantic, more addicted to chasing the next experience, it is likely not the kind of approval that liberates. Now let us talk about why people crave signs so strongly. People crave signs because they are afraid. They are afraid of wasting effort. They are afraid of being unseen. They are afraid of being alone in the universe. They are afraid that their suffering has no meaning. When you understand this, you can treat your craving with compassion rather than shame. But compassion does not mean you obey craving. Compassion means you hold it gently and you keep practicing. In Buddhist teachings, there is a strong emphasis on not clinging to experiences. Bliss can come, visions can come, strange sensations can come, but all of it is impermanent. If you cling, you create new suffering. If you let it pass, you remain free. The same principle applies in devotional paths. A devotee may receive moments of deep feeling, but the real test is whether the devotee continues practice when the feeling is gone. This is why many mature practitioners say the greatest sign is consistency. If you can keep practicing without being bribed by pleasant experiences, your devotion is becoming pure. Purity here means it is less mixed with ego bargaining. Now I want to offer you a deeper teaching about obstacles, because obstacles often appear right when practice becomes sincere. People interpret that as rejection, but it can be the opposite. When you begin to practice seriously, the old patterns do not want to die. The old habits resist. The mind creates doubt. The body creates restlessness. Life creates distractions. This is not necessarily a cosmic attack. It is the nervous system defending the familiar, even if the familiar is suffering. So, if obstacles rise, do not panic. Do not assume you are doing it wrong. Ask instead, what is being challenged? Often it is your impatience. Often it is your attachment to comfort. Often it is your fear of change. Meeting these obstacles with steadiness is part of sadhana, and overcoming them becomes a very real sign of approval, because you are gaining mastery over your inner world. Now, in many stories, when a deity is said to show approval, it may be described with external events. Aid or opens, a path clears, help arrives at the right time. These things can happen, but even there, a mature interpretation is important. Sometimes a door opens because your mind became clear enough to see it. Sometimes help arrives because you became humble enough to ask. Sometimes a path clears because you stopped creating unnecessary conflict. In that sense, even external signs may be the natural result of inner transformation. That does not make them less sacred. It makes them more integrated with wisdom. This is also where the theme of destiny becomes practical. Many people treat destiny like a fixed script, as if their future is decided by some distant power. But destiny is also created by daily causes. If your practice makes you speak less harshly, you create fewer enemies. If your practice makes you work steadily, you create more competence. If your practice makes you rest properly, you create more health. If your practice makes you tell the truth, you create more trust. These are not mystical, but they are the building blocks of a blessed life. And when these building blocks appear, you may call them approval. I would call them the fruits of alignment. Now I want to deepen the conversation with a third scene, one that touches compassion directly. The person who was practicing met someone who was clearly suffering. The suffering person was bitter, complaining, blaming, pushing people away. The practitioner used to avoid such people, labeling them negative. But now something had changed. Instead of immediate judgment, the practitioner felt empathy. Not naive empathy that allows harm, but clear empathy that recognizes pain. They listened for a while. They did not try to fix everything. They offered a small kindness. They offered presence. They spoke gently. They set boundaries where needed, but without cruelty. Later, the suffering person said, "I did not expect anyone to treat me like a human today." That moment is a sign. Why? Because if your Sadhana is real, it does not only make you feel peaceful in isolation, it makes you more humane in the world. Compassion is the proof of practice. Compassion is the fragrance that shows the flower is real. In the Buddhist view, compassion creates wholesome karma. In everyday terms, compassion creates good consequences. People trust you. People feel safe. Relationships heal. Communities become less harsh. Your life becomes a blessing. That is approval in its highest form. Now I want to speak about the danger of spiritual pride again, because it is one of the most common obstacles for sincere people. Pride can appear quietly. It says, "I am practicing more than others. I am pure. I am closer. I am special." Then you start looking for signs to confirm your specialness. This is how the ego hijacks devotion. A deity showing approval would not inflate that. True approval dissolves ego. It makes you simpler. It makes you more ordinary in a beautiful way. You stop performing spirituality and you start living it. So if you want a practical way to test whether you are moving in the right direction, look for these signs. You apologize faster. You argue less. You listen more. You crave less validation. You can sit with discomfort without immediately escaping. You choose long-term integrity over short-term pleasure. You stop feeding resentment. You feel gratitude more often, not forced gratitude, but natural gratitude. You have more patience with yourself, which then becomes patience with others. These are not glamorous, but they are profound. Now I want to bring this to a reflective close by returning to the original craving for a sign. If you are listening and you feel that craving, I want you to hold it gently. You do not need to shame it, but you also do not need to obey it. The deepest sign is the quiet inner shift that makes you more awake. If you still want something you can call a sign, here is one that is available to almost everyone. The next time you are about to react in a way that creates harm, and you pause, and you remember your practice, and you choose a wiser response, treat that as a sign, because that moment did not come from your old habits. That moment came from your sadhana. And if you can collect enough of those moments, your whole life will change. That is the real miracle. Not a dramatic event that impresses your mind, but a steady transformation that liberates your heart. Thank you for being here with me. If you've been walking a path of practice and feeling uncertain, I hope this talk gave you a calmer way to recognize what matters. If you have been chasing signs, I hope you can now chase sincerity instead. Sincerity is the kind of offering that always finds its way home. Now, I want to invite you to share your experience in the comments. What kind of sign have you been hoping for? And what quiet changes have you noticed in your own mind? Your patience, your speech, your compassion, your ability to face obstacles without collapsing. Share your story, because someone reading it may feel less alone. And that is already a form of compassion. If you want more long-form talks that connect practice with awakening, wisdom, karma, compassion, and destiny in everyday life, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment so more people can find this space. Your support helps keep these conversations alive, and it helps turn spiritual ideas into lived transformation.